Hello everybody! Welcome to a brand new Let's Play series in Hearts of Iron for Kaiserreich. Today we are going to be playing as the Ottoman Empire in the brand new update. So we played as Syria, basically fighting against the Ottomans. Realized the Ottomans are like much stronger than they used to be. So why not be the stronger power? So research slot, of course we're going to go for all of our basics. We want to go for research speed. Then we want to go for efficiency cap plus construction speed. Fantastic. Right now we have 24 factories. We're on 5,316. So I think that means that we want to get more military factories right now. Probably spell them right in Constantinople. I think that seems completely okay. After that, I think the only thing we can actually go for right now is expanding the education ministry. Failure to push through education decree will have severe consequences. Okay, well, we'll try to avoid that. So, I know the Ottomans have like way more paths than they used to. What I want to try to do, if you remember from our very first attempt at 32 divisions, if you remember from our first attempt for the Syria campaign, the Ottomans went for like a federalist system. So, like, if we can try to recreate that, I don't know how you do it. Let me just be clear on that. I don't know how you actually get that accomplished. But if we can get that accomplished, and I think that's going to be a little bit more interesting because it's like the new route that we can go for. I'll just have you guys on the, I was going to say on the Persian border, but I don't think that's right. I think I want you on the border with Arabia. And the reason I want you on the border with Arabia is because if you remember from our other campaigns, eventually we might be able to actually like wrestle control of Arabia like completely, depending on if they rebel or not. The Ottoman Empire before the Weltkrieg. The Ottoman Empire, once one of the greatest empires in history, saw its decline commence in the late 18th century, developing to the point of being known as the sick man of Europe by the 20th century. The inability to effectively industrialize, constant foreign meddling in its affairs, and a troubling hold on a lot of its provinces meant that the Ottoman Sultanate had fallen back well behind the European powers by 1876. Nonetheless, the Ottomans were formed, and despite the issues these posed on a local level, where tribal issues and corrupt bureaucracy reigned supreme, light could be seen. Prompted by Muhammad III in the late 19th century and further pursued by the young Ottomans, radical changes were introduced in the empire, land ownership was restructured, janissaries eradicated, central rule re-established in the regions such as Mosul and Al-Hassa, and the constitution promulgated. The focus on these reforms was based on the idea of Ottomanism, and attempted to foster a common identity for all inhabitants beside their local one. It would not be enough. With Almanid II's rise to power, a change would come once more. Under the pretext of the Russo-Turkish War, the constitution was abolished and parliament sent packing. This period saw radical centralization of power under the figure of the Sultan Caliph. With the constant threat by Christian powers, the Sultan turned towards pan-Islam based on the prestige of the Caliphate. Despite enjoying great success with the Muslim population, this would only hasten the departure of the territories without these. Furthermore, his absolute rule fostered great discontent among the population with increasing familiarity, which increasingly became familiar with Western ideas. This resistance would consolidate itself in the shape of the Committee of Union and Progress. A coup d'etat in 1908 made Ottoman politics, long suppressed by the Sultan, burst into the open. Dozens of parties would attempt to find seat within the newly restored parliament, as it seemed that Ottoman decline was finally at its end. The united democratic forces would not last, and quickly saw a split between the decentralist and the centralist. Through a term of 5 years, the two sides would battle for control. In 1913, with the raid on the Sublime Porte, the game was up. The centralists, with significant public figures such as the three pashas, would eradicate all reigning power of the decentralist and shape the nation in their image. Under the great threat by the imperialists, they ultimately strengthened ties with Germany. So I'm guessing, let's read all of it. Why not? Part 1 and 2, then we'll read part 2 and 2. The Ottoman Empire during the Weltkrieg, part 1 of 2. The Ottoman Empire finally officially entered the Weltkrieg on October 29, 1914, with the arrival of Wilhelmshaven and Goben and Breslau, and the shelling of Odessa. The Ottomans won several significant victories in the early years of the war, such as the Battle of Gallipoli and the Siege of Kut. But there were setbacks as well, such as the disastrous Caucasus campaign against the Russians. Disaster continued in 1916 with the start of the Air Revolt, combined with a new British offensive under the command of General Edmund Allenby. Coming to a head in 1918, devastating defeats in Palestine led to a mass retreat of Ottoman forces. Jerusalem, Damascus, and Aleppo fell in quick succession, as the only controversial decision by the commander of the Sixth Army to withdraw into the mountain Anatolia was able to stop the chain reaction. A valiant defeat at Antep and a Pyrrhic victory near Maras ultimately stopped Albany in his tracks. At that point, the atmosphere of the empire was rapidly changing, as the Ottoman government realized that even a victory would come at a cost. Furthermore, a change that happened in the palace as well. The CUP puppet Mehmed V had passed away, and in his wake followed the far more assertive Valentin. Seeing the collapse of his empire on all fronts, and with the CUP government held responsible for the disaster, he would lash out in an attempt to shift power to his allies in the HIF. With the ground heating up under their feet, Talat Pasha would then, in an instigation of Durma Pasha, attempt to shut down the Sultan. Harsh famine in Istanbul due to the refusal by German forces to supply it with Ukrainian grain, betrayed the Caucasus by its allies, and attempted silencing the Sultan, and rumors that the commander of the 6th Army was in open conflict with the Ministry of War, would finally tip the bucket over. In a massive wave of anti-German and pacifist fervor, the cabinet of Talat Pasha was forced to resign and concede to the Sultan. Ahmet Talat Pasha was appointed Grand Vizier and tasked with the creation of the government of national unity. Under pressure from the CUP, whose unwillingness to lift their grasp on power made the negotiations collapse, Ahmet Talat Pasha resigned and was replaced by Ahmet Isa Pasha. Creating a government consisting of Kavit Bey, Mehmet Pasha, and Rolf Pasha, it became quickly clear that the CUP was far from defeated. The fall of Greece and the growing risk of revolution in the British protectorate of Egypt caused Albany to revise his strategy. It would draw part of his forces. As France collapsed in late 1919, the war entered its closing stages. In contrast with the Western Front, however, where Austrian forces pushed into Italy and German forces into France and Belgium, the Ottomans at this vital moment had lost over half of their empire, either occupied or readily vulnerable to concentrated British attack, and were held up by British forces unlikely to stand down. Sultan Valentin opened negotiation with the British in an attempt to salvage what remained of his empire, whilst Britain reconsidered its attitude in the Middle East. With the Treaty of Copenhagen ceasefire later this year, demanding immediate withdrawal from all remaining Entente forces from the territory of Central Powers, a rapid solution of the Eastern question was necessary. Further trouble for the British in Egypt, Afghanistan, and now occupied Iraq ultimately forced their hand, and the order was given to withdraw. Only Palestine and the Vilayet of Basra would remain under occupation at the insistence of the Jan Smuts and Leo Amri, until the acceptance treaty was reached surrounding the rights of minorities, masking our tensions of an Indian base in Iraq and a fortified position near the Suez. With uncertainty in the political climate of the Ottoman Empire and punishment for the perpetrators of the Armenian massacres far from likely. With uncertainty in the political climate of the Ottoman Empire and the punishment for the perpetrators of the Armenian massacres far from likely, international opinion shifted away from the empire, losing much of its support from the Central Powers. An accord was reached in the summer of 1920, where two autonomous regions were established, to great anger of both the Turks and the Arabs. The Musraitite of Jerusalem, the MOJ, was created in Palestine, stretching from the Albany Line to the Red Sea. This de jure part of the Ottoman Empire was to be governed by an international council consisting of the German Empire, the British Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the USA, and the Ottomans themselves. Forbidding the entry of Ottoman troops, an international Germandre force would maintain the peace within Palestine. In Invade al-Basra, a new home was to be created for the Assyrian people, whose exodus from the plains of Naiva and Lake Urima had left the refugees in Iran open hostility to their ambitions. Like, this whole first episode could be like reading, so I apologize for that. The Ottoman Empire after the Weltkrieg. As the formal peace arrived in 1921, the borders of the Ottoman Empire had largely remained the same. The Oblast of Kars and Adra were recovered with the addition of Yevren was the Algerian. While in the Aegean, the Italians were pushed out of the Damocles. The damage had been immense, however, as through the actions of the CUP, especially Durma Pasha, tension between the Turks and the Arabs had burst into the open, whilst Eastern Anatolia and Mount Lebanon, whose whole populations were eradicated either through forced deportation or starvation. Losses of the Turkish side had been colossal as well, leading to underpopulation and sharp decline in agricultural output, the empire's main source of income. Although the Arab revolt had been a colossal failure, the need for reform was recognized. Entering to the Arab Congress of 1913, the Arab language was recognized as the second language of the empire. Increasing factionalism within the CUP and a meteoric rise of many military figures tore away at the internal stability of the party. The betrayal of the German allies in Palestine gave rise to a substantial anti-German faction. As public opinion of the party declined even further, the CUP changed its name to Tedelit and openly ousted some of the dictatorial figures within. Pasha went packing, Ottoman influence was greatly reduced. Working from his position as Minister of War, Mustafa Kemal Pasha ousted the German military mission and commenced an ambitious military restructuring. Receiving great acclaim for his actions, Kemal continued laying the foundations for the rise to power. Fearing another Enver Pasha, the upper committee of the party pushed Kavit Bey forward as its leader. Incapable of successfully challenging him, Kemal made a successful bid for his power in 1925. The party would change the name for the second time to the Ottoman People's Party. And I think this is the last text box. In 1926, elections ended in a victory for the OHF. But many were quick to remark that it was less due to the party itself and more due to the fragmentation of the opposition, where more than a dozen parties fought for any given seat. The newly appointed Grand Vizier did not hide his ambitions, and in a flurry of reforms he pushed the nation towards his ideals. Massive strides were undertaken in areas of education, economic recovery, and the fight against the religious establishment. The authoritarian style of the Grand Vizier, however, led to further splintering of the party, when his former ally and friend, Kamil Kaiser Pasha, broke with the party and created his Democratic Party. Under threat of a rapid centralization of the government apparatus, and with many conservatives afraid that the OFH may be attempting to break with tradition, the 1931 election ended with the first electoral defeat of the OHF, the Ottoman Party for Administration Decentralization, under its leader Haki al-Hazim. Became the grand winner of the election, then formed a coalition with the HIF and the DF to provide a united front against the growing centralist threat. The coalition, however, was under constant threat, with various parties that played part in it, conflict opinions of the non-OHF policy. Tensions reached a breaking point in late 1932, when the government of Haki al-Azim collapsed due to disagreement with the HIF and the DF. A new government was created under HIF leadership, but as a minority government failed to achieve its goals of decentralization and liberalization. The continued failures of this coalition went a long way in repairing the reputation of the OHF, which received a solid majority in the 1935 elections, as Grand Vizier Mustafa Kemal Pasha began his second term in office. Signs had started to appear that he may be looking for an alternative to the constant obstruction by the Ottoman Chamber of Deputies and interference from the conservative lobby through the Caliph. So I think we want to go for more like the liberalization approach, mostly just because that is... I think it's a break. I don't think before, as the Ottomans, you can go anything other than, I think, authoritarian democratic or for paternal autocrats. I think those are the only two paths you can go before. So I think we want to maybe go a little bit more towards like the social liberals. So the Ottoman economy in 1936, aftermath of the infamous decade. Well, we've got bad news for you in about a month from now. When the dust settled in 1920 and finally came an end to the almost decade of non-stop war, the economy of the Ottoman Empire lay in tatters. The manufacturing economy, which had seen a slow but steady growth in the CUP era, was knocked down as the effects of the Armenian genocide took their toll on the educated middle class. Doctors, engineers, entrepreneurs, etc. all became critical jobs as the continued exodus by Greek Ottoman citizens in Asia Minor showed how devastating the national economy plan was to the ravaged nation. In a similar way, the agricultural sector was ruined as the real effects of the war started to sink in. The loss of the Anatolian Turkish population was mind-boggling, as almost 25% of the pre-war population was gone, leaving behind an abundance of land without the manpower to work it. Nonetheless, the Sublime Porte did not sit idle. The plans for a swift recovery were quickly drafted, as the first post-war cabinet made it their #1 priority. Railroads, left behind by investors of nations no longer existing, were nationalized. The dreaded OPDA was completely shut down as its monopolies transferred over to the state. The National Economy Program became the #1 priority for the Ottoman government, as the horrors of the war and the reliance of the untrustworthy non-Turkish population left deep scars among the ruling elite. A Muslim bourgeoisie had to be groomed to challenge the traditional Christian dominance, and the people educated, and the empire finally launched into the 20th century. There's so much. The Ottoman economy in 1936, an era of growth. As the years ticked by and the economy reached its pre-war state by the late 20s, and then the ruling OHF took development to the next level, as a sequence of 4-year plans were laid on the table, and the hold of the government on the economy was tightened even further. Then in 1931, the unthinkable happened. As the Nationalist Coalition was decisively brought down by the Liberal Entente, to reopen the economy to foreign investment and tone down the statist measures. So carefully crafted in a decade before, nonetheless, the economy kept expanding as industry popped up over in Anatolia and the Levant. Financed by an almost never-ending wave of economic prosperity in the German Empire, it's a little bit risky there, I would say, and a low import cost of machinery and building materials. By the middle of the 30s, the Turkish economy had never seen better days, as the feeling of euphoria and progress could be felt from Beirut to Smyrna. Nonetheless, many have pointed out warning signs on the horizon as the increasing instability on the continent and the stagnation of the German economy will likely bring issues to the Grand Orient as well. Well, I can say that's definitely true. Okay, Kerensky's been shot. Nobody's surprised by that. Also, what actually decisions do we have here? Oh, we have you guys as well. You 3. I'm gonna throw you on this front line just in case this guy ends up rebelling against us. And of course, we'll take our Army and Navy experience for free. Thank you very much. After that, I mean, what else? What's the other option you have for us? It is expand the Timar system. I mean, there's like so many options here. Autonomous regions. So what do? Cyprus is fully controlled by the Ottoman Empire. Is at peace. Effects when selected. Unrest will increase. For 400 days, manpower in Ankara goes down. Cyprus manpower goes up. Does not have a non-socialist authoritarian government. So this is centralization of the Greek islands. We have 40% when integration of the Greek reaches 50%. We upgrade to Vilayet status, and when it's more 100%, and we can upgrade to Ottoman province. Yeah, that seems okay. We'll put that there. What is unrest right now in Cyprus? It's at 11%. I mean, that's actually not so bad. We're missing some infantry equipment. That's not a big surprise. Overall, actually, I think this looks fine. We do need to import probably like... Ooh, we're actually missing like 13 steel. We'll get 1 steel from... And now we'll get 2 steel from the Germans. That's okay. Yeah, we went decent amount of civilian factories for this time at least. So I'm not too worried about that. We'll try to integrate all these areas. Centralization of Syria. So Syria's at 25%. Greece at 40%. Kurdistan's at 50%. Arabia's at 30%, and Iraq is at 50%. Tripolitani's at 10%. So there's a lot of stuff that we'll probably need to try to centralize at some point. But education debate in the Marseille education debate in the Marseille 1 Musaban. The fight over the minds and spirits of the population has been vigorously fought over the last decades, as the unrelenting pace of modernization has also greatly affected this field. Started deep in the 19th century, the reforms have progressed into a steady progression over the years, mostly carried by the secular movement. The OHF had continued with this conflict post-Weltkrieg, with the first in participation of women in higher education, and officially full co-education only a few years later, promoted by Sultan Vedintin. Nonetheless, this policy is finding it hard to be fully implemented on the ground, as heavy opposition from the conservative Olomena and the continued split of the various education systems make any centralization hard to accomplish. The Ottoman education system, consisting of 3 main branches, remains divided, and even though the Adadi and the Sultani, reformist schools establishment by the Tanzimat reforms, have been united into one distinct curriculum, the Madranis, religious education, and the minority schools, protected by the Millet system, remain a thorn in the side of the Ministry of National Education. Long been a staple of the OHF, it has detailed its plans to unite all 3 systems, place them directly under the ministry, and to streamline the curriculum to both promote social cohesion and to make it more approachable to the common citizen. Over the last few years, primarily during the first tenure of the 1927, massive strides were made towards accomplishing the school, but the subsequent decentralized government of 1931 has overturned this policy, once more in favor of education of the Vilayet system level. As such, causing a divide both in the quality and accessibility of education, depending on the efforts of the Wali. Now that the OHF is firmly back in the saddle, it has brought to the table the sum of its designs, the Co-Education Unification Act, finally putting the law into the full unification of education in the realm, and forced co-education of male and female. The party has found itself up against the wall of conservative forces funded by powerful Sufi lodges in an attempt to prevent their power over the government to fade. We're gonna get 30 more political power. Is that enough for us to try to centralize some more stuff? I mean, you're at 40%. I feel like if anything, I'd probably want to try to get Iraq to be integrated first. But we can't do this because we have not done reeling the Arab Vilayets, striking for autocracy. Okay, so I mean, a lot of these options we actually don't have a choice for. We expand to Southalization operations. Where is that? Do you? Unrest will increase in Hijaz. You get 1 building slot. 5% more, No, it'll decrease. Okay, sure, why not? I'm assuming the less... Or the more centralized we are, maybe the less likely these areas actually are to rebel against us in the future. That's my best guess. I don't really know, though. So you guys will invade here just in case. Just in case they have any plans. Of course, we'll draw up lines in Bulgaria as well, because there are a handful of cores that we want to take. nice for us. So hopefully Azerbaijan will join our faction like they did with our last campaign of Syria. So the clown king of Britain does not... Who cares? I got my own thing to deal with in the Ottoman Empire. I got no time to worry about what the British are doing. You know what I mean? So what are we still missing here? So it's probably not manpower. It's mostly just probably guns. 188. I think then right now, let's actually send priority to the garrisons. The treaties fight back against the OHF. A petition signed by 300 ulama from across the empire has reached the desk of the Grand Vizier earlier this week, as the nearing vote on the Co-Education Unification Act is stirring up commotion throughout the nation. Nonetheless, there is no united opposition to the act, as even within the ulama themselves, many are seeing the benefit of centralized education, and with some even openly expressing their support for the act. Lose time political power. Social conservative gets up a little bit more, but I really don't think that's a big deal. We also have a widespread illiteracy, institutionalized Islam. What are we at right now? The higher local unrest in the vilayets are represented by unrest, the larger the penalty. Well, right now we're at negative 25%. That seems pretty bad. That seems actually really bad. Okay. Armed neutrality. War support goes down. You get more defense on core territory. That war does not matter. Do we have any options we can? Yes. Replace the penal code. Or found the judicial commission. I mean, we need to do all three of these. Do we want to install a single party dictatorship though? I don't think so. I think we want to go down the liberal tree. Just because it's new, right? Vote on the education decree. Including the controversial Co-Education and Unification Act, the release one, Usapa, Chamber of Representatives, was presented to the table with a wide variety of decrees and plans by the moderate OHF. As the OHF has a majority in the House after their 1935 election success, many are worried that the Sultan may yet interfere through the Senate, whose members are almost entirely appointed by the Padishah himself. Known for being a devout Muslim and sharing many of the conservative tendencies of the opposition, the Sultan has kept himself absent from the political process ever since his ascension 10 years ago. Either because of general apathy, or as some whispered out of fear of what happened to Abdullah II may yet happen to him as well. With the future of religious education through the Midrash now on the line, however, many expect the Caliph of Islam to finally take a stance against the secularist. I'm wondering, because if he wants to get the liberals to win, then I think it makes sense for us to kind of have all of their options fail. So we're just going to have him fail everything he tries to do. But I think that at least for right now, this is going to be a good time for us to end this episode. So thanks for watching, my name is Anthnwam. If you enjoyed, burn a thumbs up. Not enjoy, throw a thumb down. If you want to see more, subscribe, and goodbye.